Hello there ladies and gentlemen, ASCII here for Nerf TV with a look at the dungeons in the Elder Scrolls Online. So there will essentially be two types of dungeon. The first are open world, public, uninstanced caves or ruins where you, along with any number of random players, will be able to run through the cave. This is more like what you would expect from the previous Elder Scrolls games, just with more players. The second type is instanced, organised 4-player dungeons where you, along with 3 team members, will fight your way through, likely encountering traditional dungeon tropes such as traps, bosses and maybe the occasional puzzle. The public dungeons are fairly easy to understand. Filled with the same kind of mobs you would find outside, they can be completed with relative ease and are accessible to anyone. It's nice to have this making a return, as it used to be a classic MMO feature that's faded a little more in recent years, but for this video we'll be primarily focused on the organised 4-man dungeons. There will be 16 of these dotted around the world and they require 4-man organised groups to beat, at least if you're at the recommended level. It is possible to revisit these dungeons later once you've out-leveled the content, and in that case it will be much easier to beat and perhaps even soloable. Now these dungeons will require you to complete them using classic MMO RPG tropes known as the Holy Trinity. This means that your team will be made up of a tank, a healer and 2 damage dealers. Now this system fell out of favour a little in MMO design over recent years, as it was felt that it made it so players often couldn't play with their friends if they were the wrong classes, or that it became a challenge to fill a group and standing around in chat spamming looking for healer isn't much fun. Now while I would have to agree with those thoughts, it can't be denied that there is still a calling for the tactics and the planning that the classic trifecta brings with it. Games that moved away from this have often become subject to dungeons that are easily beaten or just require high damage to burn them through them. So those experienced with MMOs will know the different roles and what they mean, but I'll just cover them quickly. Damage dealers or DPS are your classic spellcasters or archers, high damage, often ranged but not always. Tanks are built to do 2 things, hold aggression on the boss or mobs on them, and also soak up all the damage. Basically they are stopping the other players from getting attacked. And lastly, the healer keeps the group alive, primarily focused on healing the tank. Going back to this system is an interesting move. Like I said, it's generally fallen out of favour, and I can't really see it appealing to those that are coming to ESO as fans of the previous games where they could play all the content soloable, whereas now they've actually got to find specific people to help them that they might not even know. That might not appeal to everybody. It can also be a very damaging system if population numbers fall hard. As of all MMOs, it will undoubtedly see numbers fall after the first month and then more as time goes on. And as those players who joined the game at launch reach the end game content, the number of new players wanting to run the first few dungeons drops hard, and it can be damaging to the experience of those new players if they're trying to find a group and it's very difficult. So I mentioned earlier there are 16 dungeons in total. Well, of those 16, 6 will be repeatable at level 50 as master dungeons. So they will have different and more challenging enemies, new storylines that continue from the ones you previously experienced, and new rewards that will be worthy of your higher level. This is a great way to reuse assets and add some endgame dungeons for the PvE players. It's a nice idea and fairly common now, however I do hope more unique endgame dungeons will be added in the future. So there is a good amount of content there for PvE players. The return of the public dungeons is great. Not only is it essentially an MMO version of a classic Elder Scrolls dungeon, it's something I've missed in MMOs for a while now. They could also make good use of this in the PvP area to add something a little bit different. As far as the 4-man instance dungeons go, I'm kind of torn. Part of me misses the more structured and planned play, but I also don't want to be sat for ages waiting for a group finder to pop or crying out for a tank or healer. I'd felt that MMOs have made strides in getting forward and getting away from the Holy Trinity, and I've been hoping that someone would find the balance between everyone can do everything and being locked into a very specific role. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like Elder Scrolls Online will be the game to do that. Part of me wonders how it would translate to console gamers without any MMO experience at all. I know if I started talking about tanks, healers and DPS to some of my friends, they'd have no idea what I'm on about, even though they spend hours playing on their Xbox or PlayStation. ZeniMax walks a very challenging road with their dungeons, and I suppose that's why they've revisited a tried and tested system, even if perhaps it is a little bit dated. Are you a fan of going back to the classics, or should they have innovated a little bit more? Let us know what you think, but for now, I've been ASCII and you've been watching Nerf TV. Thank you for watching.